don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that was a Bigfoot. Let me tell you a story. These stories are based upon true events. Welcome to another Bigfoot Campfire Story. This is one of those tales that you really hope is true, as it makes Bigfoot seem just a bit too much like us. But Richie and his kids, Betty and Bruce, were on a Christmas vacation near Hilt, California, and the Klamouth National Forest when they had a snowy encounter unlike anything I had heard before. This is their story. I picked up the kids, Bruce and Betty, from their mom's house for a Christmas vacation. Finally, I got to take them to the mountains for snow and sledding and all kinds of fun. Bruce, being the oldest, had his nose buried in his phone, but Betty, turning 11 in January, was just bouncing off the walls with anticipation. Question after question like a machine gun. Is there snow yet? Yes. How much is there? I don't know. When will it start snowing? Today. What time today? Later on. Let's at least hope we get there before it gets bad. How cold will it be? Cold. It went on like that for about an hour until we finally reached the cabin I had rented. It wasn't anything too fancy, but it was set off by itself. I found it on Craigslist really cheap, and I was surprised to find not only electricity, but 4G internet and a flushing toilet. Okay, there has to be something wrong with this place. Well, the owner said there were instructions on what to avoid in the area in a book on the coffee table. Sure enough, there it was. Well, Bruce picked it up and started reading it, and he started laughing. He says, "Dad, you're not going to believe this, but people in this book swear they're seeing Bigfoot up here, and that they get watched while outside. There's no way that's true, right?" So I asked to see the book and flipped to the front, only to read this. If you're reading these instructions, then it's already too late, so just follow the rules and no one will get hurt. It read like a ransom note from the Unabomber. Anyhow, the biggest rule is don't let food outside in any way at night. Not in your car, not on the tables, not on the porch. All food should be put away and stored as to not attract them, in parentheses, close to the house. When you venture outdoors, go in pairs. Never go alone for walks, and never encourage them to come close to you. And finally, if they run off, don't follow or chase them. It will not end well for you. If you follow these simple rules, you and they will have a wonderful adventure together. Wow. What did I get me and the kids into? I read on in the back where visitors to the cabin had made their own entries. One read, "Mary S., Lincoln, Illinois. The big red one came close today. He seemed to be watching me as I washed dishes in the creek. Later that evening, we could hear him in the same spot I cleaned up in. I hope they fix the water soon." Another read, "Billy G. Something must be really wrong. Tim has not come back from his hike. I told him not to go alone, but he didn't listen. Now they're screaming outside." Marion H. from Bedford, Pennsylvania. "I saw a group of them today in a meadow. I was out with the wife. I think they were digging for something to eat, as the dirt was flying up from all of them. The moment they noticed us, they ran off." And just then, loud from outside, a thud came from our cabin. Well, we dropped everything as Betty was trying to get her sled off the car alone. It slipped and fell off, knocking her down to the ground. Well, she wasn't hurt. No harm, no foul, as they say, so we picked it up and made our way back inside. When it started to snow outside, and that was a good thing, as it was getting to be pretty bare on the hills around the cabin. But the forecast was for a fresh 8 to 12 inches overnight, so there should be tons of play in the morning. We set up our beds for the night, and Bruce had the fire just roaring, so he was sending selfies to his friends from his phone. The snow was really falling outside as we sat by the window watching it drop. Finally, it was off to bed just about 10 p.m. Sometime during the night, it got really cold outside. I got up to use the bathroom, so I stoked up the wood-burning stove and really got it burning. Well, I saw something moving out the front window, so I sat down to watch. But it was way too far out there, and it just seemed like a shadow, so I went back to bed. The morning came fast, and Betty was soon jumping on my cot, yelling, "Daddy, Daddy, it's time to go study, get up, let's go!" As she ran out of the room. All of the sleeping rooms kind of led to a big room that had a kitchen and a living room all kind of together. Well, we fed the wood stove, and we ate a few donuts, and headed out for some sledding and tubing. Right out of the back of the cabin was a hill that led to a great sledding drop-off just 40 yards from the cabin. So we pushed our way through, which was now nearly 16 inches of fresh powder, and it was wet and frozen, which would make it really fast. Well, Bruce went down the hill on his tractor tube first, and it bounced in a few places, but made a great track for the metal sled tracks to follow. Well, I had waxed those things up, so it should be good and fast, and Betty was a pro. This wasn't her first time at this thing. Well, she hopped on and pushed off and flew right down the hill, cutting a path right to the bottom, and then rolling off before hitting some trees. Amazing fun for hours, and up and down the hill the kids went. I even took a turn or two on the tube, and by the end of the morning the entire hill was like ice, and the kids were just flying to the bottom. It was on my last ride down that I noticed the tracks. Just as I picked up the tube to walk back up the snow hill steps that we had carved into the side of the hill, I noticed a set of footprints that led right up to a tree and then trailed off the other side, like something had stopped in and watched us playing in the snow. Well, I didn't want to scare the kids, but these tracks were huge, nearly a third longer and a quarter wider than my snow boot, and it looked like a man with no shoes on. Was something playing a trick on me? Well, either way, it was time to go, so Betty came down the hill one last time, and Bruce yelled he was going to go back to the cabin, but I remembered what the book said, and yelled back for him to stay and wait, and that's exactly what he did. Well, on the way back to the cabin, we heard what sounded like a giggle, right in the woods from behind us. We all turned at the exact same time and went, "What was that?" As everything went silent again, we made our way back inside. We were all cold, really worn out from sledding. It seemed like food and a nap was next on the list, so I made up some chowder and stoked up the wood stove, put on some hot chocolate from milk, and that would do the trick. 45 minutes later, we were all snoring away. I awoke to the kids yelling at each other. It was nearly dark outside. Betty swore that Bruce had taken her sled and hid it because it was gone, and the tracks led to the woods and back. Well, Bruce and I went out. We noticed that the tracks didn't lead that way at all. As a matter of fact, they led from the woods and back to the woods. Someone or something has taken Betty's sled. But it was far too dark out now to go into the woods, so we figured we'd track it down in the morning. The next morning, Betty again was up with the sun, and now she demanded that we go look for her sled. As she put it, "Track down the sorry SOB that stole my ride." So off the three of us went, up the hill, over to the sledding hill. Sure enough, there was her sled at the bottom of the hill. Well, Bruce put her on her lap, and they rode to the bottom of the hill, and quickly, Betty dragged her sled back to the top, complaining it stinks like a dirty bear. Well, sure enough, there were long, dark hairs stuck in the screws and the runners of the sled. It even looked like there was a little bit of blood on one of the runners. Well, it didn't seem to be too worse for wear, so down the hill the kids went again as I stood watch up at the top to make sure we didn't have any strange visitors. Off and on, after a couple of breaks, the kids were finally ready to go get warmed up. And again, as we walked to the cabin, we heard noises, as if something was following us back through the woods, and we just couldn't see it. It would wait for us to almost get out of sight, and then move up a few trees to keep us in sight once again. And this went on until we reached the cabin. Strange to say the least. This time we put Betty's sled right against the side of the house by the window so she could, let me get this right, eyeball the stealing sucker that took her sled face to face, so she moved her cot out there for the night and set up surveillance on it. So we all ate a nice stew, and we settled in to watch the snowfall for the night, and we were expected up to 2 more feet by morning. It must have been midnight when I was awoken by screams of, "Daddy! Monsters!" from poor Betty outside by the window, so I jumped up to my feet and rushed out to catch her as she ran to me, telling me she saw monsters outside. Big, hairy monkey monsters like Bigfoot. We'd all seen Finding Bigfoot, and she knew what they could be, but how could she see anything out there? I couldn't see 2 feet out the window. No, she said they were right at the window looking in at me. So I put my boots on and grabbed the flashlight while Bruce had gotten dressed, and we ventured out into the snow. Sure enough, tracks led right up to the front window. There were even handprints on the window where they had been looking in. And sure again, once again, Betty's sled was gone. Well, she was furious that her sled was gone, and now we were positive it was Bigfoot that had taken it, and it was making more sense as to why it smelled like stinky bear. Could it be that they were riding it up and down the hill at night? Well, we all put our cots together and managed to drift off to sleep again, because morning came all too fast. Well, we all got up and ate, and we let the sun really get up in the sky as we dressed, and we went out to see if the sled was in the same place that we had found it the day before. Sure enough, after that hike, we looked down the hill, and the sled is there in the tree line at the bottom. Again, the kids rode the tube down the hill, but this time they waved me down instead of coming back up with it. When I got to the bottom, I find the kids staring at the sled broken into pieces. You could plainly see where something very heavy had carved a path from the top of the hill and leading directly into an impact that the tree that left the sled destroyed. Tufts of hair stuck in the boards on the runners bent from the impact, and a blood trail and ugly trackway leading off into the woods. Well, we tracked the blood in as far as we dare, but Betty, being the smartest of us all, she wanted to go back to the cabin and forget the blood and the sled and kind of just go home. It sort of felt like the trip was over. We gathered up all of our things and we began to load the car. The day's sun had melted much of the snow and the trail out was clear enough, so home we would be, and maybe we'd rent some movies or eat some pizza, but enough with the scary, hairy monsters, Betty said. And we both agreed with her. Well, it was starting to get dark as we loaded the last of the things onto the car, and we started out of the drive when Bruce said, "Hey, stop a minute," and he got out of the car. Well, he cut the snow tube off of the roof and left it behind in the wood line and then got back in the car. He looked at Betty and said, "At least that one won't hurt them." They both giggled as we pulled out onto the road. I've had people ask me if I'd go back to that cabin, but I've never been able to find that listing again. And the email that I used that the contact made the arrangement through is now deleted. And the money has never actually left my account. I've tried to drive back many times, but I can never seem to find that exact road that that particular cabin is on. Thanks for listening. I'm Reverend Jeff, and may the Squatch be with you.